Foggia, the guy that I guess, the guy we expected to be the man to beat in terms of the championship, he's now up there going into Europe now. He's now in first place with Garcia in second. So, yeah, it's Moto3 mayhem, isn't it? Diego Moreira, the rookie, the Brazilian rookie. I mean, he was having a good ride in the lead group and just high-sided on the last lap. That was a real shame for him because, impressive guy. Only his fourth race. I mean, you've got Mino on about his 140th race or something, and Moreira there just on his fourth race. So, one to watch for the future, I think.
Just lastly on the Moto3 point, this time, well, it wasn't this time last year, but last time out in Kota, of course, huge incident in Moto3 involving Dennis Onchu as well, and that got him a 2-race ban, and that was for basically weaving almost on the straights and slowing down, and it looked like at one point he was up to his old tricks again. What did you make of that incident, Keith? Has he learned from his mistake? Luckily nothing happened, but still, it didn't look great watching it on the telly.
They're like children, aren't they? You wonder, how the teacher can get them to start behaving. It seems inbuilt in they'll do anything to try and keep a position or take a position. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they will have looked at it from all angles. If he didn't get a penalty for it, then there would have been some kind of mitigating reason that somebody somewhere will have put forward as to why not. Personally, I would say that needs clamping down on all of the time. Somebody weaving as much as that, you need to get a penalty for it. You definitely do.
And a scary moment earlier at the weekend with Alberto Sura, who sort of cut, well, whether it was just a clash of lines, but on the same place on that back straight where we saw that huge accident last year, clash with another rider, ended up going sort of into the barrier. So a lucky escape there. A session was red flag, but I mean, I think he's got a wrist injury from that. So lucky escape really, but again, it showed what can happen when Moto3 bikes, make contact on these straights, and exactly why race direction is so keen to keep them from doing these sort of quick changes of direction, let's say, whether it's, you want to call it swerving or deliberate, or it's deliberate or not. The end result is if the two lines cross, it's a massive accident at those speeds.
Now, this is something we've seen a lot in Moto3, Keith, but it also came up in MotoGP qualifying in particular. If we go back to that, we saw drivers deliberately slowing down, trying to get a tow. We had the likes of Alex Rins, who was absolutely furious with what was going on. Aleix Espargaro too, he kept saying Alex Marquez and Morbidelli kept waiting for him, and he was annoyed at himself because he felt like that contributed to him falling off in qualifying one. What did you make of all that? There's been calls by some of the riders, we need to change this qualifying format. Would a super pole type idea work better? Do we need to strictly in place, a rider goes out, then 5 seconds later, the next rider goes out, and that's how it should be done? What did you think?
No, I think our qualifying system is really, really good. I think what's happened is we seem to have allowed ourselves to go into a two-tier system. Moto3, Moto2 get penalised straight away for all that mucking about. MotoGP seem to get away with it. Now, if that's the case, it needs dealing with. It is the case, actually. It's not if that's the case. It is the case. Clearly, MotoGP do not get penalised for messing around, waiting for a tow here and there, or being offline, waiting, over on the hard shoulder, if you want. Can't remember what I'd call it now. On the runoff areas. Sometimes you'll see a rider that will go on the runoff area and let everybody by. There definitely seems to be a two-tier penalty system at the moment. Moto3, Moto2 get bang penalty for doing that. MotoGP don't, and I wonder why that is. It's not right. And the likes of Rins, if he had any influence, would be able to bring that down on IRTA, bring that down on the stewards, make a noise about it. But it definitely needs doing, because we're seeing it more and more often. And a slipstream at somewhere like Kota counts. You're going to get a slipstream there. You are going to get an advantage. Most tracks, MotoGP don't need slipstreams. The bikes are so powerful, and the way they lay rubber and the way that they squirt out of corners, they don't really need a slipstream. It's always handy to have a slipstream. It's going to give you some advantage, but it's a smaller advantage the bigger the bikes, the bigger the horsepower. But from a safety perspective, no, there shouldn't be bikes hanging around. There shouldn't be bikes on near a racing line going slowly. And we've seen what happens in Moto3 and Moto2. So it should be the same thing penalty-wise for MotoGP, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's spot on with that. I think that we're seeing MotoGP guys, as Rins said, behaving worse than Moto3 almost at times now. It seems they've spotted a loophole, which is that people will only get penalties in MotoGP, it seems, if you disturb a rider on a fast lap. We saw that with Quartararo and Miller in Argentina, didn't we? Where Miller was on a slow lap and Quartararo caught him on a fast lap. Miller got a penalty. That situation, you do get penalised. Where you don't get penalised is if you're not on a fast lap. So if you're Aleix Espargaro, in his case, he was angry. You come out the pits and a load of riders wait for you to leave the pits and follow you out and then sit right behind you. Or as Keith says, they're sitting on the side of the track waiting for you to come out of the pits or start your lap. And then they drop behind you or alongside you. There's no penalty under the current situation anyway for doing that. And Aleix believes that's wrong. It should be more like Moto3, where the riders, they get, I think it's 110%, isn't it? They have to be for their each sector. Once they get on track, you can't slow down. Unless you're falling off the bike, you're not allowed to slow down. You're not allowed to run off. And I think a lot of people would prefer to see that situation in MotoGP. I guess from the other side, we have seen that the race direction, the stewards, they don't want to get involved. They don't want to keep giving out penalties all the time. This is, they really don't want to do that. But I think it is getting to the stage where they will have to step in. And, we're seeing this every week now.
You got to be careful with penalties, I think, because, rafts of penalties. Didn't we get to a stage, Harry, and you're going to help me with this, in Formula One where you had like 153 grid place penalties because you'd got a new motor or a new this or a new that. I mean, it got to a point where everybody went, what?
I think at one point, Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso in the McLaren, when they were struggling with their Honda engine, had a 50-place grid penalty, and they'd qualified last already. So, and you're not carrying that through to the next race either, so it's just a pointless penalty.
Yeah, I think that we can do without getting to that situation, but certainly I think something more needs to be done. And in the point of not just safety, in the point of fairness, I think Aleix Espargaro, he can be he can come across as a bit of a whinger. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and you're always going to get honestly what he's thinking, which some people will admire and others won't. But the point is, you're always going to hear it from Aleix, and he does have a point. It should be dealt with in a better way. And Pete, that you're right about each sector. They have the ability to be able to see whether somebody is dawdling in each sector, electronically. Add that together with what they've got now from a visual point of view as well, and you can tell whether somebody is genuinely slow through a sector because they've run off the track or whatever it might be. The excuse used to be, I've outbraked myself, I'll come back on the track again. It was a good old feigning of I've got in a bit of a wobble, so I'll go off the track now, just as he waits for the next rider to go through so he can follow him. It's just that kind of gamesmanship. But I think that we've certainly got the technology nowadays to be able to spot a faker if there's one out there. Start doling out a penalty, and believe me, management in MotoGP will soon smack their riders into shape, because unlike Moto3, where I've said before, they're like children. You don't seem to be able to put any rule to make them to adhere to. There's always some naughty little Johnny that sits at the back of the class and gives you aggravation. But in MotoGP, it's levels of professionalism higher than just about any other class. And once those penalties have come up, riders will listen. They will adhere to whatever the actual ruling is, and it will rule it out straight away, I believe. But it seems like they've let them get away with it. And of course, riders, again, with the child type analogy, once a child gets away with something, he's going to push the boundary to the next level, and that's where we seem to be at the minute with MotoGP and this dawdling syndrome.
Yeah, and it's a conversation we spoke so much about last year, as you say. If they can do it, they'll just keep doing it until they're told not to. All right, well, it's a weekend off for MotoGP, and then it returns back in Europe, in Portimao, Portugal. So the standings at the moment in MotoGP, it's now Enea Bastianini, as we said, leading the way with 61 points ahead of Alex Rins on 56, and Aleix Espargaro rounds out the top three. In Moto 2, Celestino Vietti leads with 70 points ahead of Iagura and Tony Arbolino on 54 and 56 points apiece. And in Moto 3, Dennis Foggia now leads the championship with 74 points ahead of Sergio Garcia and Andrea Minu. They've got 58 and 41 points respectively. But the standings everyone is keen to know about, of course, are our predictions. Now, it's not good news for me, sadly. Keith, you got another point in the bag because you did get Rins on the podium in the wrong position, but you got him on there. You also predicted Bagnaia and Paul Espargaro, but they were absent in this case. Pete, you went for Martin Bagnaia and Alex Rins, so you do get a point on the board. So Keith gets a point and has now 3 in total to extend his championship lead. Pete now gets a point on the board with 1, and unfortunately, I'm still last with 0 points after my Martin, Mir and Binder. Binder, where were you, mate? Where were you? You really outdone me there. So yes, unfortunately, no improvements there. Let us know how you got on as well in your own point standings in the comments below. But I think we'll save the predictions for a week's time. But we will be back. So make sure you're tuned in across crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the next couple of weeks. And then, as I say, we will be back next week to preview all things Portimao. Get your questions in, leave them in the comments section, or tweet, Instagram or Facebook us. Just search Crash MotoGP. Please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. And we shall see you right back here next week. My thanks as always to Pete McLaren and Keith Huewen. I've been Harry Benjamin. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.